Welcome to the Womanhood podcast. I'm your host, Shannon, somatic and energetic integration specialist for women, Foundress of Somatic Body and Creatress of the SomaCycle method and the Feminine Harmony program. And I'm here to inspire you to reclaim your rhythms, remember your wisdom, and root into your womanhood. Each week, I'll be discussing topics centered around our womanhood from a multifaceted somatic and energetic viewpoint, weaving together both science with spirituality and masculinity with femininity. We'll be talking cyclical natures and rhythms, intuition, instincts, ancient womb wisdom, and grounded embodiment strategies. Find yourself a cozy space and let's get started. While I believe that clear communication skills are key for conflict resolution in relationships, I also believe that most relationship conflicts aren't actually from communication at all. Communication is the backbone, it's the foundation, but it's not the heart, the depth, and the soul of what is required to move through conflict and deep moments of resistance in relationships. It's about the nervous system wanting to feel safe, and by understanding our bodies and our nervous system states, we can better communicate what it is we need clearly. So in this episode of the Womanhood podcast, I'm going to take you through relationship conflict from a somatic perspective. I'm going to go through co-regulation, attachment, emotional safety, boundaries, somatic relationship tools that you can use as well at the end. And we're going to kind of normalize conflict and triggers and give you a bit more of a neutral perspective on how we can move through conflict in relationships and a bucking of heads in relationships in more of a body-led approach. The first point I want to make is that relationships serve as nervous system mirrors. And what I mean by that is, when you've probably already heard the term, when we find ourselves being triggered, it's often that we're being triggered because it's a mirror of a part of us that we are seeing in another person. So really, when you think about it, we don't actually react to people as much as reacting to the situation that it's reflecting back to us. So starting with that point of relationships serving as mirrors, when we look at how we don't react to people, but the situation at hand, we can think back to, for example, when we're kids and there's not a care in the world when we're kids, when we're starting off. And then over time, the cares start piling up, right? As we start to mature from childhood, from infancy into adolescence, into teenhood, into young adulthood. Those cares that we had no care in the world for to begin with start to pile up over time from a number of different things, for a number of different reasons, them being all experiences throughout our lives as individuals and also just as society, how we tend to perceive the world with whatever culture and family and societal upbringings we have around us at the time. And so we start to think back to when we were kids and we had not a care in the world, and then relate that to current time where when we are in conflict with someone, there's the subtle energy shifts, the unspoken vibes, the behaviors and expressions, and what we're taking in through the unspoken when in conflict. It all plays a part of our reality and how we relate to our reality in that given moment, but how we relate to it based on a past memory from our upbringing, from our maturity, from infancy all the way to adulthood. And so when we catch ourselves, and this is where triggers come in, when we catch ourselves in the moment of being reactive, of feeling triggered, of feeling tested and trialed, when we catch ourselves in those old survival patterns, it's useful to also look at that as not really a failure in that moment, but a survival pattern. This concept of triggers being old survival patterns rather than personal failure is one that people often resist even just perceiving because they're triggered in the moment. You know, it's like you don't like being told when you're being emotional. You don't like being told when you're being reactive. It's the same thing with admitting that you are in an old pattern. We often default when we're in those reactive states and we catch ourselves or someone points it out. The most common reaction from there is to retreat and feel shame, or the opposite, we fawn, we appease, we people please. And so that's like coming from that sense of personal failure when we catch ourselves in the reactive state, when we catch ourselves in that moment of being triggered, we default into shame and fawning and appeasing and guilt. And that's what leads to us believing that it's a personal failure to be reactive, to be in a moment of being triggered. But really, we're all humans. It all happens. We can't really avoid it. It happens. This is a part of being human. We have to eat, sleep, poop, pee, think, breathe, communicate. We have to be able to see. We have to be able to have something in our lives that gives us purpose. Otherwise, why are we here, right? And so there's all these things that are just a part of being human. And the more we fight that, the more the resistance builds up, the more the trigger builds up, and the more reactive we become throughout our general life. And so it's the funny thing with triggers, because yes, it's often old survival patterns, but it's also that personal failure label that you're putting onto yourself by feeling the guilt, feeling the shame, or going into a fawn or people-pleasing response once you've noticed that you're in a triggered mode. That's what holds us back from actually working through it. And so what if, when in relationship with others, feeling conflict, feeling reactive, feeling challenged, what if in those moments we caught ourselves in 4K, in the triggered state, on a conscious level, and we asked ourselves, where's it coming from? Start to bypass that guilt, that shame, that people-pleasing, the appeasing, and accept the humanness of who we are and ask the real question, where is it coming from? And this is how relationships really can serve as mirrors, is what's the meaning behind the conflict? Asking that simple question. What's the meaning behind the trigger, behind the resistance, behind that feeling when you're bucking heads with people? And here are they're generalized, but 3 reasons why we often find ourselves in conflict with relationships within a dynamic with someone. Number 1, it's a sign of dysregulation. So that's that first mirror when we're in conflict with someone. There is a sign of dysregulation, whether it be in the dynamic of the relationship itself, whether it be on your end or their end. But often, again, it serves as a mirror. Often if there's a dysregulation going on for yourself, there's going to be a dysregulation for that other person, whether they're aware of it or not. Again, it's that subtle energy body, that subtle vibe, the unconscious behaviors, facial expressions, reactions, responses, ways of communicating, whether it be spoken or unspoken. There's this sign of dysregulation. So that's one reason why we can be in conflict with another person, is our nervous system states are dysregulated. We're both buying into our old memories, our old patterns, and our old stories, and we're being triggered by that. And that's a mirror for both of us in correlation. So that's one reason. We're in a state of dysregulation. Often that's like the surface level. If you want to go deeper, you can start to look at unmet needs or needs not being communicated. That's another thing. What of my needs, or what about my needs have I not seen yet that I need to communicate clearly because I haven't been? And how the other person responds on the other end once you decide you do want to communicate it, that's on them. If they don't want to fulfill that need, and this is the other thing, is it's not always about the other person fulfilling the need for you, but rather you understanding that there's an unmet need. And if you can do it, you do it. If they can do it and they're happy to do it, they can do it. But when it comes to an unmet need and we realize we have a need that we want to be met, we need to question, is that need coming from a true place, or is it coming from a place of fear, a fear that I need to work through, a fear that's irrational? And then once you figure out what that need is, and that it's actually a need that you really do actually want, communicating it clearly so that the other person can understand, and then they can kind of move through it with you and support you with it because they now understand it. There's no level of frustration or resistance because it's all laid out on the table. And that does require a form of vulnerability as well. One other reason, because I said I'm going to take you through the 3 general reasons why conflict does occur in relationships, is unspoken boundaries. And now this is the opposite to communicating someone your needs. It's actually communicating to someone your boundaries. Here are my boundaries. Will you like to honor them? And if not, I respectfully back off in whichever way you need to in order to feel safe, in order to feel like it's a supportive relationship. It's not that you have to cut off a relationship altogether just because they don't want to meet a boundary, but it's putting up the boundaries, whether it's consciously and communicating that clearly or not, whether it's just subtly doing it in the background because they're not responding, no matter how many times you've talked to them. You cannot force people to do something they're not going to do. If they wanted to do it, they would have done it already. And that is the truth, the harsh truth. And so when it comes to conflict and relationships, it's going to be surface level dysregulation. Both of your nervous systems are dysregulated. And in terms of energy body, that's the energy bodies are not in sync and they're not really on the same timeline, on the same frequency. That's what I mean by dysregulation too. It's not just the nervous system. It's the subtle energetic body, the emotions, the mental body. They're not in sync. And that's just surface level picking up on a reason of conflict. You can go deeper into unmet needs or unmet boundaries. What are the unmet needs or boundaries that I haven't put forth? And are they needs and boundaries that I need to facilitate? Or is it something I need to co-regulate with them and ask them to be a part of it? And then based on their response, again, just remembering that it's not always going to be that they want to do it. And so if they don't, you take matters into your hands of what you can control and leave them to do the rest of whatever it is. It might mean stepping away from that relationship altogether and saying goodbye. It might mean stepping back a little bit. It might mean that you communicate your boundaries and your needs and they can now understand that clearer and meet you on that same frequency again. And then that relationship dynamic is no longer dysregulated, it's regulated and optimized. And so just like our own states of our nervous system, we do go through moments of dysregulation, regulation, and optimization. And the same thing happens in relationships. And this is why I say relationships serve as a mirror. So now we've covered the reasons why relational conflicts can happen and how relationships serve as a mirror. I now want to talk about co-regulation versus codependence and hyperindependence, because hyperindependence and codependence are a form of self-abandonment when we really break it down. Whereas co-regulation is, again, it's like, here are my needs and my boundaries. Do you want to meet me there? That's co-regulation versus here are my unmet needs and I can't find it in myself. Even though I can't find it in myself, so I need you to do it for me, and I'm going to force that upon you. And if you don't do that, I'm going to then resent you and blame you, even though it's not actually your responsibility in the first place. That's what codependence is, for example. And then we have hyperindependence, which is I'm not even going to communicate my need to you because I don't trust you enough. And so we're going to have this boundary here and it's all going to be superficial and you're going to have to be okay with that. That's that hyper-independence. And so this is where you can take those examples and see that co-regulation is actually the more healthy, the more mutually open, mutually vulnerable, and mutually, like, it builds trust in relationships versus the extreme ends of that. You know, co-regulation, I think of it as like a spectrum when it comes to relationships. You've got co-regulation in the middle, where everyone's happy and balanced and we can come back to it. We're not always going to be there, but it's just embracing humanness and coming back to it. Then we have the hyper-independence, and on the other side of the spectrum, the codependence. And so it's about coming back to co-regulation all the time. And that's why it's also useful to think again of relationship dynamics as nervous system states, even though it's not just nervous system states, but using those as examples so that you can think about it as coming back to regulation from dysregulation and from a regulated, healthy relationship dynamic into optimization. And it's probably useful if you want to go back and listen to episode 8 and 9, where I do speak about those states like dysregulation, regulation, optimization, so that you can kind of build upon that knowledge base and that concept if you're not familiar with it. But in summary, when we talk about co-regulation in relationships, it's about that mutual safety, that mutual presence that we can have with one another. And by aiming for that, we are then laying everything out, inviting in conscious awareness of our reactive states and admitting that we are humanness. We are embracing it together mutually as a relational dynamic. Now, when it comes to approaching relationships in a somatic way on a practical level, we can start to look at signs of imbalance from a somatic perspective, as in signs of dysregulation in a relationship or imbalance in a relationship, by looking at the signs that present in the body. When we have dysregulation within relationships, we can start to look at things like noticing how our body feels when we're around that person, noticing how our body feels when we're in a certain social event and who we feel most comfortable in that space when we're in like big social occasions, for example. Who is it that we feel most comfortable with and gravitate towards versus the people who we don't? What do we notice in our body when we're picking up on that? Is there a tight chest, a shallow breath? Are we tensing our muscles? We can also look at our nervous system states. Am I tending to people please and appease and put my opinions and needs and beliefs aside and fawning over them just to appease them? And then noticing also how we feel after the interaction, whether it's one-on-one in a close relational dynamic or whether it's, again, in a social occasion, noticing how we feel afterwards. Is there a collapse after the interaction, like a collapse of energy? Are we feeling drained or are we feeling really good? Even noticing the ways in which we speak. Are we speaking slowly? Are we speaking calmly? Are we feeling calm? And that's why noticing how we speak is especially useful, because sometimes we don't even notice in the moment that when we're in autopilot that we are feeling tense, that we are feeling uptight and like speed speaking, so it's like noticing the rate at which we are speaking and picking up on that, because that is a sign as to whether we are feeling calm and relaxed with that person or whether we are feeling overstimulated or nervous or anxious or triggered. Notice the tone as well, not just the pace, but the tone. How is what I'm saying coming out? And is what I'm saying what I actually mean as well? I have a friend of mine that says double woman speak, and he says that in moments when I'm saying something, but the undertone, the tone in which I'm saying it has a different meaning behind it. And it is a good way to check in with yourself. It is a good way to bring awareness to yourself. Is what I'm saying actually what I mean, wholly, completely, or is there an undertone that doesn't match what I'm saying? In other words, passive aggression. And this isn't just something women do, men do it as well when they're not conscious, when they're in go, 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 we all do it. But whenever he says double woman speak, I put aside my ego and the fact that, that's a bit misogynistic to be saying double woman speak, because we all experience it. But it is true that as women, we tend to speak with an undertone, and it can be unconscious because we lead predominantly from our emotional bodies naturally as women, whereas men are more logical, more methodical, more mental body led, whereas women tend to be more emotional body led. And so that's where double woman speak does come in, as much as that triggers me. And so I'm aware of it though. I'm consciously aware of it. And the fact that that is a prompt for me when I hear that, to check in with what the emotional undertones are in what I'm saying. You can also do a little boundary sensation check, and this is especially useful when you are in conflict with someone in a relationship. So coming back to conflict, when you're in that moment of resistance or bucking heads, or the dynamic just doesn't seem to be going well, you can do a little boundary sensation check by checking, do I feel expansive or contractive right now? And you can also apply this boundary check when you're in the midst of decision making with someone. So when you're in the midst of a yes/no question or a decision that needs to be made, you can ask yourself, does this answer that I'm about to speak or that I'm about to choose, does this feel expansive or does it feel contractive in my body? So listening to your body's cues as you think about the decision you're going to make, or as you say that decision, because we're human, we have errors. It's okay to say yes and then notice how you felt and then go, actually, that didn't feel good in my body. I'm sorry, I said yes, but I actually don't mean yes. For example, for me, I've said yes in moments where it's not a full body yes, or it's not a yes. And so if it's not a yes, it's a no. And that's not binary, but it's something I do use, especially when it's crucial, like big life decisions. I will apply if it's not a yes, it's a no approach. And I mean that in a full body sense as well. And so that boundary sensation check can be really useful in moments of relational conflict and in moments of decision making when in relation with others as well. Another thing I want to speak to when it comes to relationship conflict and looking at it through a somatic perspective and a somatic lens is looking at support. Whether we're in emotional conflicts at the time or not, having healthy support and redefining our support that we have in life in general is especially going to be useful. Just like I said, communication skills are the backbone and the foundation, so is our support systems. It's not the sole reason as to why the conflict is occurring. I truly believe that it's coming from deeper things, from memories, from reactive states, from nervous system states. But when it comes to that surface level, foundational level, we should all be ticking this box. Yes, clear communication skills, tick that box as foundational, but also our support system. That should be foundational as well. So this is really what's going to set the foundations for you to then build on top of that, your emotional awareness, your nervous system state awareness, your somatic body awareness, so awareness of how your body feels when you're interacting with people, especially in moments of conflict. And so when we look at redefining our support systems, this can be looked at, and I like to discuss it as internal support systems, like subcategorize it as internal support systems and external support systems. So just like I talked about having your needs met, whether it's yourself who needs to meet those needs or asking if someone else can co-regulate those needs with you. It's the same with support. There's internal support systems, things that you are responsible for initiating, going through yourself and doing yourself. And then there's external support systems where you ask for them to be a part of it, that co-regulation. Internal support systems can be things like mindfulness, meditation, yoga, going for a walk in nature, going for a surf, swimming in the ocean, things like that. It can be doing journaling, having a weekly journal prompt check, like a somatic check-in that gives you somatic cues that you're answering. It could be redefining your meal prep for the week, because that's a way of supporting your body. It could be redefining or reprogramming a certain mindset, because that helps with the emotional body. It could be rearranging your social calendar to meet the rhythms of what it is to be a woman through your 4 phases of your cycle, whether you follow the lunar cycle and you no longer have a bleed cycle, or whether you are going through those 4 phases of the menstruation cycle, the bleed cycle. You could actually look at your social calendar and use that as a form of internal support to navigate your social calendar, which will help your energy body, your energy exchanges throughout social occasions. And so these are the approaches that we can use for our internal support systems, the things we are in control of. With our external support systems, these being things that we asked to have within co-regulation of another in exchange. If I want to be treated a certain way, I've got to treat others the exact same way in return. It's that equal energetic exchange. When it comes to external support systems, we can look to things like a Reiki treatment, for example. This will address my energetic body predominantly, but it addresses all 4 bodies. And there's an energetic exchange there, a external support where the Reiki practitioner is applying the Reiki on me, and in exchange, I am paying them for it in some way, whatever the arrangement is. And so that's an example of an external support system. There is an energetic exchange there. And I've used that quite literally because Reiki is literally an energy therapy. But there's other examples, like something as simple as a car. Having your own car can be your support system to get from A to B. There's that energy exchange of paying for the car in order to receive one. There's also the external support system of friendship, having friends and having that equal exchange and support. You could have a monthly womanhood call that you join every month. I'm saying that because I do womanhood web calls monthly within my sisterhood chat. You could have a sisterhood group chat that you're a part of and check in once a week or however often you want to. These are all external support systems that you can be a part of, and within that energetic exchange, you're receiving support, and so are they. And so they're examples of those external kind of co-regulation types of support systems. But I just wanted to point that out because a lot of us don't do that check of our foundations. And so that would be one of my other hot tips is like, do your checklist. And I actually put this in my Feminine Harmony program. Do your checklist of your support systems. Have a list of reminders, essentially, of what you can do to seek external support as well as internal support. When you're caught in those moments of conflict, whether it be self-conflict or in relational dynamic conflict, where can you seek support? And how can you discern for yourself that it's a need you need to meet versus what you can ask for external support, a need that you can invite someone else to meet? And you might be asking, like, how am I going to know that? How am I going to discern that for myself? Well, check in with your body. Of course, I'm going to say that. Check in with your body. See what your body feels like. Does it contract and constrict when you think about asking someone else for it? When you think about doing it for yourself, does it feel nice? When you think about asking someone else, is it coming from a place of just nervousness and an uncomfortable reasoning as to why you're asking? Or is it coming from a real intuition that you feel like they won't be able to accept that? Because the reality is like, if someone's not going to be able to meet that need, they're not going to do it. If someone was going to do something, they'd have done it. And so we do have to catch ourselves when we're discerning whether it's a need we can meet or someone else can meet, especially when it comes to relationship dynamics, because we do need to ask ourselves, like, where's my responsibility in this myself? And if I can't meet that need for myself, is that person going to be open to it? Okay, I don't know, but I'll ask. And that's a part of how you're going to be able to discern if it's a external support or an external need that's being met or an internal need that you can meet. I think I've said everything I want to say for this particular episode, so I'm going to leave you with one last somatic cue. I tend to do this at the end of my episodes, a little mini reflection, and that is, what does safety feel like in my body when I think of complete and utter safety? And who do I feel that with? Not just within myself, like what do I feel like in my body, when I'm safe in myself, but who else do I feel that with? And just taking note from there, who is it that you feel most safe with, that you can co-regulate with? Because those are the people where you can invite in all of these principles that I've just gone through throughout this episode. You can start to apply all these relational approaches in a somatic or body-led way. Invite that into those relationships that you feel that safety with, and watch those relationships thrive. And if a sense of community, a sense of healthy relational dynamic is something that you're craving, I'll pop in the show notes below the invitation, the application form for my sisterhood group, my community sisterhood group on WhatsApp. You can also join my Somatic Body subscriber, my newsletter, to be a part of the community there, where I invite you into my monthly womanhood web calls. Or you can also begin the Feminine Harmony Starter course, which gives you the very first module of my 12-month program, just a little taster for $22. So I'm going to pop all those links in the show notes below, and I might see you around soon. But otherwise, I'll be seeing you next week, where we're going to be discussing feminine burnout cycles, why women burn out differently. I'll see you then. As we finish this week's episode, remember that you are your own rhythm keeper. So just keep listening for that rhythm and keep coming home to you. Until next time, with love, Shannon at Somatic Body.